Hello and welcome to an unexpected podcast. My name is Tim, and with me as always, we have Matt, Mick, and Devin. Joining us again is Evan. On this week's episode, we're going to be going over the Army of Laketown, and we're going to be going over a list by Jorg Schmidt. So we're going to move over to the list first, so I will actually move that over to Matt.
All right, so this is a Lothlorien allied with Rohan list that he was curious about our thoughts. So in this list, he has Galadriel, who's the leader. She does not appear to have a mirror. 6 Gladrom Warriors with bow and spear, 6 Gladrom Warriors with shield and spear, 3 Gladrom Warriors with shield, 1 Gladrom Warrior with a banner, 2 guards of the Gladrom court, and that's a full 18-figure warband for Galadriel. And she is the leader of this list. And allied, we have Theoden with heavy armor, armored horse, and shield. And he has 3 Rohan Royal Guard with horse, 3 Rohan Royal Guard with horse and throwing spear, 3 Warriors of Rohan, excuse me, with shield and axe, and 3 Warriors of Rohan with shield and throwing weapon. And comes up at 600 points, 32 models, 6 might, 6 bows, 6 throwing weapons, and it's a green alliance. So Lothlorien keeps the resistance to magic, and Rohan keeps the strength 4 on the charge with Theoden. And he writes, Galadriel's the leader, stays behind cover with the warriors with bows, and basically keeps herself out of trouble with fate rerolls, and throwing out immobilizes and commands, which is the way you use Galadriel. The guards of Gladrom court can be used to kind of check high fight opponents. It's got a banner for elves. Theoden brings heroic march, plus his royal guards of the offensive line and meant to break through enemy lines, and can be used to flank, get objectives, and cause damage with the charge. And the 6 warriors of Rohan are here to give a front rank for the elves. Basically a cheap front rank for the elves. So thoughts on this? I guess one note, I'd be a little nervous of this at 600 points with only 1 hitter, and that hitter being Theoden. Just because Theoden is fight 5 and he is a bit squishy. But let's put a pin in that and going on and move on, because that is, I think, kind of one of the predicates of the list of, basically allying something in with Galadriel. And at 600 points, I understand the limitations, but kind of with those caveats of Galadriel and an ally, it's not clear to me that there's necessarily a better solution. Some other, kind of low-hanging fruit here. There's a Gladrom Warrior with a banner. I'd drop one of the throwing weapons from the Warrior of Rohan and give him a spear and a shield, just so he can do something useful behind the lines. And
wait, were you suggesting something about that banner? Because you mentioned the banner, but didn't make a comment on it.
Yeah, so all right. So just to be clear what I'm saying here, there is because I'm actually looking at the screen and not everybody who's listening will be doing that. So there is a Gladrom Warrior in Galadriel's warband. The Gladrom Warrior has a banner. It does not appear to have any other war gear. So what I would do is I would drop one of the throwing weapons from the Warrior and Rohan and give that banner bearer a spear and a shield.
Gotcha.
So that banner bearer can do something useful in the battle line besides wave his banner around. And also be a little better protected. I would also suggest dropping the other 2 throwing weapons off the Warriors of Rohan and giving them to Royal Guard. Because I don't think that it is worth spending 2 points for a throwing weapon for a guy on foot. I do think it is worth spending 2 points for a throwing spear for somebody on a horse that can either use it as a charge as they come in, or can back up 5 inches and still throw it from outside of a foot charge range. I think the throwing weapons are far more useful on horse, and they're worth the 2 points on horse. I don't actually think that they are worth the 2 points on foot. Those are kind of my small comments on this. I think it's probably worth having a bit of a discussion as to whether at 600 points, Galadriel and Theoden as your two heroes are viable. But I'll open the floor for that.
Go ahead.
Yeah, so I was just thinking about Galadriel, and at 600 points and below, as we discussed before in the Lothlorien episode, we weren't entirely sure that she'd be such a good choice. Obviously, at higher points she is, but I was actually just looking at the profile of Celeborn, who for 20 points more brings a lot more fighting alongside him. That obviously would mean possibly dropping 3 warriors from his warband because of Valor, but there is still space in Theoden's warband. So I would consider potentially swapping something to bring Celeborn in this situation, just because it is he is quite a strong hero, and at lower points there aren't that many things that can take him out so easily.
I think at 600 he was a little worried about he never says it, but a lot of people get worried about the Ithilien Ranger Legion.
Right.
I think he wanted the shooting mitigation. That's probably one of the reasons he's sticking to Galadriel like this on 600, other than maybe a desire to play Galadriel. But
yeah, but I mean, an Ithilien Legion here at 600 points is gonna have what, 40 or like 45 models anyway, or something like that. So
yeah,
okay, well, let's say you take Galadriel. Okay, so you got there, you start fighting, you get surrounded, you don't really have enough killing power, they still swarm you and kill you. But so then if you have Celeborn, they'll probably just shoot you down, and then Celeborn's gonna kill something. So either way, you're probably not doing very well against it. But then against an open field, I think you're better off with a better hero in this situation.
So it's worth thinking about here the issue that at 600 points, there are several armies that if you don't have blinding light in your list and you end up with the wrong scenario, have the potential just to blow you apart. Obviously, Rangers of Ithilien is one of those and probably the preeminent example of one of those. But there are others. Serpent Horde can do that. Corsairs of Umbar can do that. There are a few others that can do that as well. Probably, Rivendell Knights can go in that list as well. And an argument can be made, and this is probably worth talking about at a different point on the podcast, that at 600 points and below, you need blinding light in your list to you need either to be a very heavy shooty army like Corsairs or Rangers of Ithilien or Serpent Horde, or you need blinding light in your list to survive them. And I think that's why Galadriel is here. And then the question becomes, do you need more than just Theoden as a hitter in the list as well? And that's kind of the head scratcher here, whether Theoden supported by Galadriel and her spells is enough to do the job. Because I agree. I agree with you, Mick. If you are not in a meta that has one of those super shooty armies that tends to show up at 600 points and below, then yes, Celeborn is a good choice here. Drop 3 random elves, increase Theoden's warband accordingly, and put Celeborn in this list. And I think that works out really well. Whether that can survive against a heavy shooty army, I'm in the wrong situation. I'm not sure. And maybe you just accept risk and you do it anyway and hope that you don't draw that army in that scenario. Because, if you draw Rangers of Ithilien in Contest of Champions, who cares?
Sure. I was also actually wondering, because Jorg's name sounds German, so I was just wondering whether the local meta in Germany might also be more good versus evil prone. Because obviously, in this situation, if this was a list that was specifically for good versus evil versus list against all comers, then again, there are pros and cons for blinding light, and it's not specified. So yeah, I would assume it's probably versus everybody, but I just thought I just remembered that there are certain countries where good versus evil is quite popular.
Yeah, from what I've seen in Germany, they play almost exclusively good versus evil. And I almost think that sort of hitting power problem is sort of mitigated, I would say, in good versus evil, because evil can't get those like high defense troops that good can get, and they don't have those massive heroes that will cut through your troops in turn. Though I still see that like having Galadriel and a 2-attack, only strength 5 on the charge, fight 5 model isn't great hitting power for 600 points, and that's part of the reason why the Shadow Lord on Fell Beast and Galadriel Lady of Light are so popular at those points levels, because they give you the blinding light so you won't get shot to pieces, and they give you a hero that can actually hit things pretty hard. And that's part of the problem with models like Galadriel and Gandalf at this points level, because they have the blinding light, but they can't hit anything, and they have no ability to grind through troops whatsoever.
I think we
So-
actually talked about this a little bit in the Lothlorien episode, where we mentioned that Galadriel is probably not effective at 600 and below.
Yeah.
And I think this is one of the reasons we also alluded to, is that he's basically now in this list relying completely on his warriors to grind through the enemy army. And at a largely strength 3 army, that's kind of problematic, especially even as Rohan is obviously the ones to do it, but half of it is on foot. So it's still not even really his most effective way to beat through an opposing army.
I mean, six Royal Guard on horse charging at fight 5 and strength 4 is actually a pretty hard hitting.
No, well, the Cav,
Cavalry.
yes, but that's like all he has. It's just that half of them.
But he's also got a really, I mean, what Galadriel brings to this list is she brings 18 warband slots, which Galadriel Lady of Light brings 0.
Yeah.
And they cost, I think they're the same points, aren't they now? They're both 100.
Well, I don't think Evan was
although
suggesting to
yeah,
put.
we're not suggesting
I was
Galadriel.
I don't-
simply saying that like
Yeah.
it's
Yeah,
Galadriel can have these problems because she can't hit anything.
yeah.
Right. I mean, I'm just defending Jorg's thought process here, that this is, I think, an army that this is not an army that kills with its heroes necessarily. This is an army that kills with its troops. It's actually pretty good at doing that, I think, and it can bring a lot of troops at 600 points.
I mean, 36 at 600, I think, is pretty healthy, especially considering the defense values of most of his army. I just wasn't sure that. Well, I mean, I guess he's winning more fights than not, which is always
no
helpful.
question about that. Yeah.
So in that sense, if you're always winning the fights, then eventually you're going to beat your opponent. I mean, obviously, barring if they have like double your model count. But I mean, I guess I was a little dismayed to see that he only had 6 cavalry. I was wondering if maybe more. And I don't know how many. I guess every cavalry model is going to be like 2 warrior slots, so it's probably going to hurt him too much.
Yeah, I think 6 is enough if you choose to kind of marshal it and commit it in the right place. And I think you do need to think about, this is not necessarily cavalry that's going to run out and grab objectives. This is cavalry that's going to need to kill in this list.
So I'm just wondering if there's someone else other than Theoden, because like Theoden is bringing the fight 5 charging Royal Guard, but the problem is he's only affecting 6 people. So is he necessarily the best choice? Like, because he mentions March, but does he really need it when he has blinding light? And that's just it's a question. He's still slowed down the pace of his infantry, so it's not like he gets a cavalry army. So is Theoden honestly necessary, or could he swap him out for, because he's only leading 12, so you could swap him out for literally anyone in the Rohirrim, especially since it's a Green Alliance, so you can just pick someone. So I mean, like, maybe the better choice is to take what Mick's saying, get a hitting power kind of hero and sacrifice the fight 5 Royal Guard. You get fight 4 instead, but that's not.
Yeah.
I mean, the only real alternative would be something like Theodred, because he has an extra attack, but then you're losing the Theoden's bonus.
I mean, and the other thing is, even though it's the fight 5 for the the Royal Guard, you're still losing the fight 4 for your regular warriors as well.
No. He only affects mounted heroes, I think.
Yeah,
right?
he only affects mounted heroes.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. Gotcha.
So
And those guys are going to be standing in front of elves, so who cares?
yeah.
No,
So
that's yeah.
so basically, I mean, since he only has 6 models benefiting from this, and look what he's sacrificing to do this. Like, he's getting the 5/5 Royal Guard, I get it, but he's already got 5/5 elves everywhere. And I know they can't support horses, I get that too. But like, if you're gonna be paying all these points for Theoden, why not get someone a little cheaper like Theodred or something like that who can hit a lot harder?
Well, then you got to wall him in.
And that's true.
Theodred is a scary guy to play.
He is,
So,
yeah,
because of
he
his
charge every turn.
charging issue.
I'm trying to run the math to see how much Aemir costs. He's
Aylmer's
120.
Yeah.
yeah.
Should
So
be
you
like
need 20 more points, I think.
20 points more. So that's 2 elves or like 3 Rohan guys.
Probably his Gladrom Court Guard.
Yeah, you don't.
Yeah.
I don't think you want to drop the Gladrom Court Guard, but you could probably find 20 points in here if you drop like one Galadrim here and drop the throwing weapons from the 3 warriors of Rohan on foot and maybe drop one of them as well. You could probably find the points, and I think Aemir might be a good choice in here. That may be a way to do it.
And he gets just a stronger hero that's more threatening than Theoden, which Theoden's great, but I feel like Theoden's like a force multiplier when you already have like 18 cavalry. Like, not 6. I mean, I'm not saying he's bad. I like Theoden. I think in this list, he's not maximized.
I mean, I think the best possibility here is you get rid of all of the cavalry from Theoden, you just add them all to Galadriel, you get the Galadrim cav. I think that would be perfect.
Yeah, you also drop the whole Theoden contingent and just take Celeborn and Cav.
Well, I think he specifically wanted to do this, and so I'm trying to do this within the context of what he's asking for. I mean, obviously, there's some great choices. I'm trying to think in the supplements because there were some other heroes added. Not Dernhelm, since she's a minor hero, so you can't ally her in. But who is Darrowine? I think you can do the free hero. He has to be with Theoden.
You really want Theoden there.
You probably don't want Elfhelm because it doesn't have heroic strike.
It doesn't have the hitting power. I think Aemir or Theodred is the way to go. Theodred, if you like living on the edge, you take Theodred. If you kind of want a safer choice, you drop a couple guys and take Aemir. And you can probably do it. I mean, you could even drop a Royal Guard and take Aemir. Royal Guard. Drop the throwing weapons from the warriors of Rohan on foot.
Okay.
Because you got some free points there. Because I don't think they.
So I think for that price, and you're dropping one of the models that would lose the benefit of Theoden anyway. With that idea, I mean, I think you're getting a much harder hitting hero that you can throw around.
Right. I mean, just generally some things to think about, and I'm not going to go into how you would necessarily work these into this warband because I'm not sure you would. But remember, the Fellowship is a green alliance with Lothlorien, and so one of the ways to add punch to a Lothlorien list is to ally in a Legolas or a Legolas on horse, or a Boromir on horse, or a Aragorn on horse. And you keep all of your army bonuses. You need to find warrior slots someplace else, so that's an entirely different discussion. There's no like quick swap out for this list, but it's just something to keep in mind.
Well, maybe if you were going to go down that road, though, that you would, get like Rumil or Haldir or, regular captain, save a bunch of points there, and that could kind of make up for that. You get 2 captains, and then, maybe your Legolas kind of a thing. But yeah, do you guys agree with the way that he'll be playing this list, or do you think they should be doing it a different way?
I think it's actually pretty effective. Like as we were reading it, I kind of liked the fact that he had this huge contingent of elves, and then he balanced out his numbers with some cheap Rohan with axes in the front that he'll likely be piercing striking with occasionally. Seems, and then having a cavalry contingent, it's actually a pretty effective one. I mean, other than the hero options, like I think it's actually a pretty solid idea. I think there's a number of different ways that you can do this list. But if you're trying to get cheap cavalry, cost-effective cavalry, then he's doing it pretty much in a pretty smart way.
Can I suggest something possibly radical also? As a discussion point. So we were talking earlier about how the troops themselves are not very killy. And I noticed 3 Warriors of Rohan have axes. Obviously, the other 3 Warriors of Rohan could also bring axes for some extra strength 4. And then I always wondered about people's opinions about just swapping weapons into other weapons. So let's say even Gladrom Warriors with axes. Whenever they stand in the front line, they could swap their glaives or whatever it was just to grab the axe, just to have the strength.
So I am hesitant to give up elven weaponry.
Yes, elven blades, exactly.
That is the only, like, I agree with what you're saying, Mick, but the elven blades, back in the old day, you could keep both. So you could have an axe and an elven blade, and I think as long as you were armed with an elven blade, period, then you got the bonus. But now you have to be fighting with it, which is the proper way it should have always been. So it got fixed, in my opinion. But once you do that, you remember the elven spears in the back, unless you're fighting with elven glaives from like Mirkwood, I don't think they count as elven.
Yeah, they don't.
So
I think if you want to add axes to anything, you want to add axes to the Rohan Royal Guard on horse, because they just swap out their swords, which they never use. And then if you've got overwhelming odds on a fight, you piercing strike and you get up to strength 5 on the charge. Yeah. And it gives you just that little bit more hitting power that you need in that list. So if you want to go and do conversions for axes, then I'd recommend doing them on those guys.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So
nothing like a strength 5 cavalry model on the chart.
Strength 5, fight 5 with Theoden, yeah.
You can almost hurl.
if he keeps Theoden, based on the advice.
Well, I want to just real quick before we get final, overview on the Mick. I know that we talked about in the Lothlorien episode how kind of the one issue with the Galadrim is that they kind of lack hitting power a little bit. So, in your opinion, is adding a point for that axe worth it, or do you kind of feel like the Elven Blade you can already go 2-handed and get that +1 if you want it, or is the axe just more worth it in your opinion?
It really depends on the list, but I would say I wouldn't mind having like a handful of axes just sprinkled in.
Is it you're saying it's worth the point though, the extra point to add that?
Well, I wouldn't necessarily say give all of your elves axes. I would say.
Well, no, I know, but like let's say you gave
a few spare points, then instead of giving someone some other equipment or like trying to squeeze another model, you could just like sprinkle in like 4 or 5 axes just to have that strength 4.
Yeah, I mean, and to be fair, obviously, I haven't added up the total on this, but if you had 3 or 4 extra points, maybe that'd be something where that'd be a good idea.
Similarly, I have a 600 point list that I was gonna take to Arlecon, where it had the Electron Guard and some Watchers of Karna, and I just randomly swapped some swords from Electron Guard to axes just to add some extra strength, because I was like, I already have 33 models or so. I already have all of my toys. What else can I just add somewhere to have more usability on something? Random strength 5 might be useful. Random strength 4 with 2 attacks might be useful. Who knows?
Okay. So overall, are we saying to replace Theoden with someone like Aemir? Is that
I think there were 2 schools of thought here. One of them is if he wants to keep the heroes that he has, take the throwing spears off of one of the Royal Guard, have the banner bearer then
not off the Royal Guard.
Not the Royal Guard. I'm sorry. The Warriors. I apologize. Yeah. So one of the Warriors, give the Gladrom Warrior a shield and a spear. Also take all the remaining throwing spears and move them to the Royal Guard. And then I think that was all the advice if you don't swap Theoden for Aemir, which I think all of us are suggesting he should do.
Okay.
Is there any advice that I missed there?
Well, we also briefly discussed that if you're feeling, if you want to do a hold my beer, watch this type list, you could save the points and go for Theodred rather than Aemir.
Yeah.
Okay. thank you for your list, York. Let us know if you end up playing with it and if you decide to take any of our decisions into account and how you do with it. Please, anybody else, leave your lists in the comment section below, and then any descriptions like York did where he was saying, I'm going to play it this way, or I want it to stay in this general theme so that we can, kind of have a real understanding of how you're going to play the list and how you want to stay as a list. We're going to move on to the main topic for today, which is the Army of Laketown, not Survivors, but the Army. Most of the profiles we went over in our Survivors of Laketown episode, we'll go over them being used in this list later, but we're going to go over the profiles that weren't in the Survivors of Laketown, but are in the Army of Laketown real quick. And then we'll go over all the profiles as a whole and how they play in this army. We'll go over the army bonus first. So the Master's purse strings, basically, it increases his special rule money bags to 12 inches rather than 6. Is this worth keeping, in your opinion, or is it worth going yellow?
Well, I think before we do this, we should probably go over the Master so we actually know what the special rule does.
That would be a good point, yes. So I believe I said Matt, if
All
you
right.
want to go over.
Master of Laketown, which is, oddly enough, the centerpiece of this list. Comes in at 50 points, which is not bad for a centerpiece model. He is a man. He has the Laketown infantry and hero keywords. He is a hero of valor, which is somewhat ironic given this particular profile, but there it is. His move is 6 inches. He is fight 4. Has a 4+ shoot if you can figure out a way to do it. He has strength 4, defense 4, 2 attacks, 2 wounds, courage of 3, 2 might, 2 will, 2 fate. He is unarmed. His heroic actions are heroic defense, which I guess he just kind of like waves his hands ineffectually in the face of your figure and can only be hit on a 6. His special rule, and this is what's going to factor into the army bonus. The first one is money bags. The Master of Laketown can choose to expend a single point of might at the start of a fight phase. If he does so, Braga, Captain of the Guard, any Laketown Guard captains, or any Laketown Guard within 6 inches of him receive a bonus of +1 to their fight value and count as being in range of a banner until the end of the phase. And the army bonus then increases the range of this from 6 inches to 12 inches. So he essentially can spend a point of might to become Bard for a turn, or at least have Bard's buff for a turn, which becomes a very useful rule within the context of this army list. Before we kind of talk about the Master and his uses, let me just read the other special rule here, which is Dragon Sickness. At the start of the game, your opponent may select one of their hero models to be the bearer of a large sum of gold. If the Master of Laketown is ever in base contact with the bear at the end of the move phase, he must pass a courage test or be removed as if he had just lost his last wound. Just a point of grammar here. The he in this sentence is not referring back to the bearer of the large sum of gold. It is referring back to the Master of Laketown. So if you bring the bear into contact with the Master of Laketown, it is the Master of Laketown that needs to make the courage test or disappear, not the bearer, as the grammar of the sentence would suggest.
All right. So I think that as far as the Master's rule, as Matt was kind of alluding to, is 12-inch. That, to go in that question that Tim asked, is the 12 inches worth it? I think when you actually maximize this army, you have like 60+ models on the field, and that can make it worth it. And that's just my opinion. But I think, Evan, you believe you have a ton of experience with this army, if I'm wrong.
Yeah, so I know I build this army list very differently from you. And the reason I do this is because this list has so many weaknesses on its own, so I always conveniently ally this. So for me, this bonus is not 12 inches, but 6 inches. And even at effectively a quarter of the range, because, yeah, that's how that works. It's still an incredible army bonus, because every time I conveniently ally this list, I don't even bother taking a banner, because 6 inches on all of my Laketown guys is plenty for the +1 fight value. And honestly, I think even though he pays a very, very expensive price for not being able to do anything in combat whatsoever, but the 6-inch +1 fight value in Banner, even though he's spending a might, is just an incredible special rule. And just, I mean, glossing over Dragon Sickness very quickly, this is a Denethor style special rule where generally both players, the person playing the master and the person playing against them, forget about this rule entirely. And when they don't forget about it, the master never ends up in combat with that hero anyways. So it just saying this off of my experience, I have never ever had this rule come up. And I've played the master many times.
If the master was a combat model, then I could see it coming up. But the fact that even without this rule in play, you're already running him away from everyone anyway, it like doesn't really come up ever for me either.
Well, I mean, you don't want to run him away from everyone because all of his special rules buff everybody else.
Blocking.
Yeah, I mean, what he ends up doing is he ends up like moving around in the middle of his like mob of bodyguards, you know, the guys with the sunglasses and the little earpieces, which fortunately, because it's Army of Laketown, you generally have enough guys to do, but you always want to be careful that he is kind of in the center of a mob, especially if the other guy's got like a flying hero, because you know that flying hero is going to have the money bags. Yeah. You know, you have to then kind of mob up the master to protect him. But I mean, just to go back to the point of Devin's way to do it versus Evan's way to do it, I think the master works either way. I don't think this is an army where you necessarily need the army bonus, but I think this is an army where you can go and make this army work if you just want to say, hey, I want to pay up 60 warriors of Laketown and have a pure Laketown army. I think that is still a viable way to play this army.
And we'll go into it. I think at the end of this list review, or this whole army review, we'll have like different lists and styles of play for convenient allies as well, so you can see the other variants of it. So,
okay. So we'll move on to another profile. Braga, Captain of the Guard. I'll move that over to Evan.
Okay, so Braga, Captain of the Guard. He's exactly the same amount of points as the Master. He's 50 points. He is same keywords, man, Laketown, infantry, hero. Instead of a hero of valor, he's a hero of fortitude. He is move 6, fight 4, strength 4, defense 5, 2 attacks, 2 wounds, courage 3. So very standard captain profile. Courage 3 is something you need to be wary of, but it's not really that problematic. And he has the very important 3 might, which for a 50-point hero is incredible. 1 will, 1 fate, which is average. He's got armor and a sword, which is why he's only defense 5. He's got 2 very useful heroic actions, heroic march and heroic defense. And then he has 2 special rules. One of them is the Master's Puppet, which is an active special rule. So as long as the Master of Laketown has will points remaining, if Braga declares a heroic action within 6 inches of the Master, you roll a d6, and then on a 4-up, the heroic action is free, and no points of might are spent. And I'm going to go over this really quickly, but first off, we're going to do the Air of Self-Importance, which is his second special rule. And Braga, any Laketown Guard captains in Laketown Guard within 3 inches of him may not take part in any heroic actions called by Bard the Bowman, Bane, son of Bard, Sigurd or Tilda. So going over the Master's Puppet special rule, which is one of the main reasons you're bringing him other than the 3 might, it means that if the Master still has will points, which he will almost always still have will points in any game, Braga is a pseudo taskmaster in a way, because any heroic action he calls, whether it's heroic move, heroic march, heroic defense, you roll a d6. On a 4-up, it's free. So on average, instead of 3 might with him, you're going to be spending, I'd say, 5 or 6 in total. Sometimes maybe a little less. Sometimes, if you're really lucky, a lot more. And for 50 points, the ability to have this incredible might generator in your army is honestly, for me, one of the reasons why you take this army over Survivors of Laketown, because he has so many might points he can spend and use them for all sorts of different things. And I would say, along with the Master, he is an auto take in every single Army of Laketown list.
Yeah,
I
Braga's
actually-
an annoying jerk.
Yeah, he's
I take a-
and remember, this can sometimes mean he has infinite heroic defenses, so he can be incredibly obnoxious to kill as well. And I know, Devin, you have a lot more experience with Air of Self-Importance, because I never take Braga with Bard. So
Yeah, I mean, I actually find it to be a lot more of a benefit than a problem. I mean, you do kind of sometimes keep Bard and Braga away from each other, but that's more for like having heroics in different places. But honestly, one of the things that's kind of funny is, although Braga can't take part in Bard's heroic actions, the opposite is not true. So you can call heroic moves with Braga and get like for free, and then get Bard to like charge in and kind of do stuff.
Bard has no air of self-importance.
Yeah, exactly. Bard's okay with listening to him.
Which, by the way, is also ironic if you've actually read the books, where Bard definitely has an air of self-importance.
I think they're going off of the movie personality.
I think you're right. Bard, to go off on a small tangent, if you read The Hobbit, Bard actually comes across as kind of a jerk. But anyway.
Yeah.
Move on.
Okay. We'll move on to the next profile, which is the Laketown Guard captain. So I'll move that over to Deb.
Well, should we cover in slight detail Alfred, or are we just going to cover them like?
I think we'll cover Alfred when we get back to. We're going to go through the new profiles, and then we'll go back to Alfred. And
so for anyone who's just seeing this episode, we covered Alfred in the Survivors of Laketown episode just because he was too important to skip, despite his profile being in here. But we will cover him going back.
Mm-hmm.
Basically, the Laketown Guard captain, he's 40 points, and he's basically hero fortitude, which you expect of a captain. Fight 4. Shoot 4 shoot value, strength 4, defense 5, 2 attacks, 2 wounds, 3 courage, 2 might, 1 will, 1 fate, armor and a sword, and has heroic march. So pretty much a standard captain, but that is all you care about in this list. This guy's job is really to bulk up the army once Alfred and Braga and the Master are already taken. By the time you've taken the other 3, you're already at like something over 39, almost like about 39 troops plus then the 3 heroes. So once you're taking them, usually in my opinion, it's if you're doing a full Laketown army, it's usually after you take Bard. But I'm sure there's variations where you skip Bard entirely, but that's not how I play the army. I think if you are allying in a green alliance and you're not convenient alliance, I think Evan will show some examples where where the Laketown Guard captains are probably the more important ones because you're saving points to bring in the numbers. But I mean, other than that, there's not a whole hell of a lot to say about these guys.
Well, it is worth mentioning that when the Master uses his special rule, he becomes a Fight 5 captain.
Oh, yes, that is actually very important to mention. So should have thought about that, actually. Yeah. So in that sense, he actually almost is, without the strength 5, he becomes almost Uruk-hai-like. So, I mean, have you used them, Matt? Like in like, what's your opinion on these guys?
So, I mean, I have to confess, I've played against this army many times because Evan plays it a lot. I'm not sure I've ever actually played this army, but I mean, a 40 point potentially Fight 5 auto bannered captain is a pretty good buy.
Mm-hmm.
And there's something to be said for just, instead of Bard, just spamming a bunch of these guys, or at least a couple of these guys.
Okay. We'll move on to the last new profile, which is the Laketown Guard. So I'll move that to Mick.
Right, so the Electron Guard is a 5-point man with Laketown and infantry and warrior keywords. Move 6, fight 3, shooting value 4+, strength 3, defense 4, 1 attack, 1 wound, courage 2. He comes with armor and a sword. and his options are bow for 1 point and spear for 1 point. So if you were to compare him to something like Laketown Militia, which is the other alternative within Laketown, you'd see that these guys can't carry shields, which is one of their drawbacks, and they don't have the very cool special rules that the Laketown Militia have. However, what these guys do have is that, again, with the Master's bonus, they do actually have Fight 4, and they benefit from the banner reroll. So you're actually able to spam quite a significant number of troops with Fight 4, which, even though they're only defense 4, they have a pretty good chance of winning a lot of combats, especially against all sorts of like Fight 3 or Fight 2 opponents. Which means that even though on paper they look really weak, in reality they can create quite a formidable line. Yeah, there's obviously always going to be a lot of them.
Yeah, I guess they're a pretty simple profile. I mean,
That's
that's really what
it.
they're.
Yeah,
is.
that's about it.
I mean, you can literally just cross out their name and write orc that can't take a shield, and you are correct, because that is
it's
what their
Fight
profile
4
is.
orc that can't take a shield.
Well, if you take the master, yes. But I mean, the biggest selling point for their profile is the fact that they are super cheap and they can get up to Fight 4. So that's all you really need with these guys. You can take them if you're doing the convenient ally route. You can do a thing like, if you say take elves or dwarves, you can take them in front and then use them as very cheap spear supports to bolster up your numbers. If you're taking a pure army list, you can either take like 45 of them and then spam a bunch of heroes from Thorin's company, or you can just go the full-on horde route, take like 60-70 models and swarm your opponent with them.
There is a huge drawback to doing that, and that is your wallet will be in serious pain.
That is true.
Economic issues aside, there is a second drawback to doing that, in that there is no Laketown Shaman.
Indeed.
And these guys are courage too. So if you run into like Black Numenorians with a Ring Wraith behind them, you may be sitting and staring at them for the entire game.
Yeah, that's
or God forbid, Army of the Dead. That would not be a fun.
Oh yeah, that would be a
situation.
terrible.
That would end badly.
I mean, I always find myself.
No, I was just going to ask, what do people think about giving them access? Just because strength 4.
The axe debate begins.
Like, since they're defense 4, whenever they lose combat, they're going to be dying more often than not anyway. And you might just get a better strength.
So it's the numbers problem. You're taking so many of these guys that arming with an axe means you're dropping like, I don't know, like 5, 6, 7 warriors.
Was that 20 points? We'll say
the problem
models.
The problem is you could just be taking survivors of Laketown that get their axes for free at that point. And the problem is, the more expensive a model is, the more worth it is to swap their weapon. Yeah. So taking something like a half troll or whatever, I mean, just give them an axe because you're paying so many points anyways. But with stuff like Laketown Guard, that their whole selling point is how incredibly cheap they are, taking basically adding on 1/5 of their points in order to give them an axe will cut into your numbers a decent amount. So, I mean, if you want to throw in 1 or 2, if you're taking a pure army just to be able to get some strength for basic troops, but I wouldn't spam them to any extent.
Okay. So there's only a couple more profiles that's a part of purely Army of Laketown, which is Bard, Bane, Sigrid, and Tilda, and then obviously Alfred.
Yeah.
So we'll go over Alfred real quick. Basically, correct me if I'm wrong, the only difference between him in this list and the other and the survivors is he can actually lead troops up to fortitude, so 12. My question to you guys with Alfred is, where are you putting his might? Because I think a lot
the will
the will to then give
someone might. Generally, you're always going to have master in this list, in my opinion. But what do you think, Alvin?
Yeah, I'd say so. Even if you're taking a convenient alliance, you normally want to give it to the master because Braga has so many might points anyways that you're going to really be able to call all of the heroic moves and heroic actions you want to. So I don't think because the thing with Survivors of Laketown is that Bard needs the extra might points because you have a shortage of not a shortage of might points, but not a ton of might points otherwise. But with Braga, you can fuel up the master, and instead of 2 turns of the 12-inch special rule, you have 4 or 5 turns of the special rule.
I also want to say that you're going to want to activate this rule quite often once you get combat. And once the master's out of will, Braga's little infinite might thing shuts off. And so, well, not infinite, but you get the idea more. So basically, you do want him to have enough will where you can comfortably keep casting that money bags rule, but yet still keep Braga churning on. So
yeah, that actually is a kind of something to think about when you're you may want to. This may be an army against which you want to cast Sap Will against the master just to turn Braga off. But
yeah,
I mean, I think with Alfred there may be circumstances where as long as you can keep him reasonably safe, you may want to wait to. I mean, normally just first turn of the game, you just dump Alfred's will into somebody and then you move on. It's not clear to me that you necessarily want to do that here. You're probably going to be putting at least 1 into the master. But the advantage of giving the might to Braga is you're not giving 1 point to Braga. You're giving 1.5 points to Braga effectively, because that 1 point that you give to Braga could turn into 2 points that you give to Braga. And it may be that you want to dump 1 into him if you're in a situation where like you're going to have to you're playing seize the camp. So you're going to have to march all the way across the board. That may be something where you give a point or 2 to Braga, or you're going to play you're playing against Goblin Town or goblins where you're fighting fight 2 and you don't care about fight 4. Then you may want to, dump something into Bard or dump something into Braga. But some thinking there.
Yeah. So just one final thing. I just need to clarify this real quick. Unlike in the Survivors of Laketown, where you have to have Bard to take Alfred, in this army, you can also have the Master. And since he's much cheaper, that's a much cheaper way to get in Alfred. So if you're looking to ally just to get like a ton of might points with something like Alfred, then this is probably a better ally than Survivors of Laketown, because in Survivors, you have to take the 205 points that is required to take Bard and then all of his, well, actually, it's more like 185 points to take Bard and all of his upgrades.
Yeah. The other thing is, because Alfred is a hero of fortitude in this, he can't be stuck in somebody else's warband, which means it is possible that Alfred is going, if you get Maelstrom of Battle, Alfred could end up on the opposite side of the board from the master when he eventually shows up. So you may have to be dumping his might points into somebody else. And oh, by the way, if you have Master of Battle, Alfred's warband goes down first. So, and you spend whatever you need to get him protected by somebody else.
So are you guys, if you're taking this list, are you trying to fit Bard with his girls in, or are you trying to fit just Bard?
He's not as necessary in this list as he is. In the Survivors, he generates a fantastic bonus. But I think, although I bring him, you notice Evan does not, and I don't necessarily see a problem with that. I think Bard becomes this grenade figure that you throw around. He's basically the hitting power of the force. I'd say only at higher points would I really even do it. Well, not necessarily always, because he's a hero of valor, which is so ironic. I know anyone who looks at this, they're like, whoever thought Bard should be leading the people who arrest him and chase him all the time? But basically, yeah, he's a hero of valor. So sometimes you can make him take the general slot if you're really worried about Contest of Champions. I mean, I don't see him as an auto include, but I see him as a very viable option. I'll put it that way.
Yeah, is there any circumstance? I mean, if you're taking Bard, is there any circumstance where you make the master your leader?
So the only reason I could see, if you want to throw Bard into the most dangerous situations, like, you know, calling it in gamer term a grenade, like if you want to just throw him in there and go nuts and with reckless abandon, then I can see the argument for leaving the master as your general. Because the master is never going to be in danger as much. Like, you're always keeping him behind a wave of bodies.
Plus, he has, you know, we've talked about how you're giving him Alfred's will for the might points, so then he can also then call, you know, heroic defenses if he needs to. So, you know, you get a bunch of guys on him, he just calls a heroic defense. And then in a little bit, I'll explain why it's not as big. I actually don't think making the master that leader is that bad, just because the heroic defense really saves him with 2 fate and 2 wounds.
Sure,
I found heroic defenses.
Sure, but there's actually not a problem with master as a leader, in that he's only courage 3.
That is true.
Once your army breaks, you don't really want your general to just be disappearing. The moment
That's a good point.
And that is actually an excellent point. Which can be a strong argument to also just keep Bard as your general. Which is insane to me that he's even able to do that. But it's just like, what?
Yeah, that's right. Why is this guy in charge?
Okay.
It's like, I get it. He let him in the books, but you either choose one. We're either representing the movies or the films here. Like,
yeah. Well, and not only that,
or
but
the movies
like,
or the books.
But
here.
Braga is the only one who kind of realizes that somebody that was in jail a moment ago maybe shouldn't be leading the army.
Yeah.
Braga's like, but wait a minute, I'm the commander of the guard. Why
And
isn't
why
anybody
does it-
listening to me?
I feel like everyone in Laketown should have that special rule. Like Alfred, the master, all of them should have the air of self-importance. Like,
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. So
Yeah, because the master's going to listen to what Bard has to say.
yeah, he's totally fine with it. Like,
Yeah.
he's totally cool with it.
So one thing about Bard is you are only taking Bard, and I repeat, only taking Bard if you have a green alliance or if you're taking a pure army. Because if you're taking a convenient alliance, you cross off Bard, you write in Thorin Oaken Shield on Wargoat, and then you have a better Bard. Congratulations. And he's so much cheaper. So the problem with Bard in this list is he's balanced. His profile and points cost are balanced around his massive banner effect and fight value effect. And that is completely useless in this list. It does absolutely nothing except benefit Bane, which is a model I would never take in this list. And overall, it's just a waste of points. And if you're taking him with Sigurd and Tilda, which you have to because it gives him fight 6, which is incredibly important, and free heroic combats, which I don't think I need to explain why those are incredible, you're spending 185 points for him. And with Thorin, you are spending 125 points for him. So you're paying 60 points for 2 extra fate points, but you're losing 3 defense. And then you're getting 2 extra movement on the horse, but you're losing a defense and you're losing the knockdown rule. And then everything else is just basically exactly the same. Thorin doesn't have the problem of Sigrid and Tilda. So you're paying tons and tons of points for a rapid shot, which you're sometimes just going to miss every single turn of the game because it's super fluky, and the great bow. So you need to really want that extra hitting power with Bard to take him in this list. And if you're just saying, oh, I'm going to throw all of these powerful heroes in from convenient allies, you do not need to take Bard. So I would say just think about it when you're taking Bard, because you are wasting, in quotation marks, a lot of points.
I like that analysis. That's great. That was great. That's a lot of hate on Bard.
Yeah, I was just looking at Devin's face right now, and I was just like, yeah, he's really taking it well.
Yeah, no, I was just like, all right, no, I can see it. I actually like that. I'm like, all right, I play pure Army of Laketown, so I just end up having him bulk up more numbers. But the comparison to Thorin, I think, is a great one. I think that the point of which you do that is when you've maxed out the numbers that you need. Obviously, with that 60 extra points, you can get another Laketown captain and some guys. So it's like, I can see the definite argument to it. I like it. I like that analysis.
So what I want to go over real quick before we go over the lists, because I know Evan wrote a couple lists. They do have one green ally, which is Thorin's company. Would you guys consider taking anybody from Thorin's company?
Yes.
And I think I know the models that Evan's referring to. So, Evan, if you want to go over the models to take from Thorin's company.
There are two that at higher points you will almost always take, and then there are some that you can take if you want. The ones that you will almost always take are obviously Gandalf and Bilbo Baggins with the ring. Gandalf is self-explanatory, and obviously you can argue, oh, well, that makes it more like a Survivors of Laketown army, but you need Gandalf in this army list at higher points. Blinding Light. With Defense 4 models everywhere, you are going to be shot to death by every single army in the game that invests in shooting. Crossbows are going to kill tons of models. Even something like Haradrim, Rangers of Ithilien, you will get shot to pieces. So you absolutely need Blinding Light at higher points. At lower points, you suffer from the problem of, oh, now you've paid 180 points for a hero that's not going to be hitting very hard. But definitely at higher points, you want him. Sorceress Blast is incredible as well. He's got strength and will, so you can do that stupid Alfred trick where you get infinite amount of might points. And other than that, yeah, you're always taking Gandalf. And then Bilbo is absolutely ridiculous because he's super cheap. So he's 60 points. And actually, interestingly enough, you don't even need Gandalf to take Bilbo because he's a hero of fortitude. So you can just convenient ally him right in there. And obviously, his stat line is absolutely atrocious. Fight 3, Strength 2, Defense 3. But he does have 3 Fate, 3 Will, and 2 Might. And most importantly, he has the ring, and for some reason, he doesn't suffer any penalties from it, even though he's exactly the same points and profile as Frodo, and Frodo suffers penalties from it. It's just so stupid. He's so good at just running in and killing any hero when you team him up with something like Bard or another hard-hitting model.
Even Braga.
Yeah, I mean, that works too. You're out fighting basically every single model. And I would personally never take Sting with him because
that's not his point.
It's 5 points, and his job isn't to hit anything. And going from strength 2 to strength 3 is not going to help you at all. So just take him as cheap as possible. However, I would actually recommend the pony. And hear me out on this. I know you're thinking like, well, he's just going to dismount off the pony if he's ever going to fight, because if he puts the ring on the pony, then the pony runs away and he has to make a thrown rider check. But the thing about Bilbo is that his big weakness is he is move 4, which is significantly slower than the rest of the army. And just for 5 points to double his movement from 4 to 8 allows you to position him where you want him. And then again, you're just spending 5 points, so you're taking away 1 Laketowner. So I would say the pony is almost an auto include if you're willing to do the conversion. Because if you don't have the model for it, then I mean, good luck. But
I have a question about Thorin's company. So one model that has had quite a lot of attention back in the UK, probably about a year ago before the pandemic, was Bifur the Dwarf. Yeah. So with his special rule where if he makes a strike, and he causes a wound, then he successfully removes the axe from his skull, and then he can call a heroic move each turn without reaching his might point. So he is 45 points and hero fortitude, so you could just drop him in as an ally. So would any of you consider allying him as one of those things where, okay, well, we already have a lot of might, but then we might as well just have another bunch of free heroic moves for the rest of the game?
So I would consider, and you know what? This is the great thing about the Survivor, or not Survivors, the Army of Laketown, is that if you went with what Evan was saying, how you didn't take Bard, so you have a whole bunch of points to use towards, models. And I think what's great about Thorin's company being so cheap for each dwarf is that each dwarf can kind of give you that really, like Biffer, for example, you get the free heroic moves. And then, like he said with Bilbo, you get the 60 points for what he does, and then you can add a big hero like Gandalf into there to give you protection. You still have your troops because all of your heroes are super cost effective. I would like Biffer. I'm going to throw another name out there, Bomber, and so the concept is right. You use Gandalf, but he can only use one spell a turn, and when he strengthens wills, it's on a 4+. But with Bomber's rule, as long as they're within base contact, you need a 4+ to give them a point of will anyway.
You never bring Gandalf to do strength and will. Strength and will is
well,
something.
no, I'm saying, but if you were to want to add will to Alfred to then give more might, you need a 4+ anyway. Bomber's on a 4+ anyway. Plus, he's not terrible in combat. He's not great, but he's not terrible. Plus,
So he's a good tank.
Yeah,
I've used it before. I've tried this whole trick you're doing, and it's not bad. Especially if you have Alfred near the Master, the Master's your general, then Bomber acts as a nice little bodyguard, to heroic defense and all that. I don't think it's a bad idea. There is an argument that Biffer might be better to do the same thing, because effectively what you're doing is a might battery. But if you are just concerned about just charging up the Master, and you're at lower points, and you couldn't get Gandalf in anyway, then...
Well, I'm saying, for example, why couldn't you take both, right? They're 90 points. Or if you wanted to give them a pony, then they're 100.
Both, what you mean, Biffer and Bomber?
Yeah, so if you added both, you get free heroic moves.
Job, really.
What's that?
They're sort of doing the same job. They're essentially just
Well,
trying to
not-
gain more might.
I would disagree with that. And I'll say Biffer's there to make sure your army moves first. Bomber's there to make sure that you have fight 4 every turn and have
And a banner.
Yeah, and a banner. So they do the same. They give you if you're lucky enough, of course, it's not guaranteed every turn, but more than likely on a 4+, you get a free point of will for Alfred, which then goes to the Master. And then he already, like we said, let's say you give all 3 of his will to him in the first place, he already has 5. More than likely, by the end of the game, almost every turn that you are fighting, you are going to have fight 4 with a banner because of Bomber. It lets Gandalf do other things, so he doesn't have to worry about anything like that. I'm not saying you would, when you're in the middle of a fight, you're going, oh, let me strengthen will Alfred, but maybe you don't use that at the beginning of the game. It lets Gandalf do whatever he wants, and then Biffer's there to call the free heroic moves every turn.
Sure, but then isn't the whole point of this army to have a lot of troops? And the more of these little heroes you add in, let's say adding Bomber or Biffer, that's like 8 models each.
Well, the thing is, the troops are so cheap, and the heroes already in the list are so cheap.
I imagine, you're just paying 100 points to get this investment that you're talking about, so it's not that bad. If that's all you're doing,
it's not terrible. But
then I at like 600, I guess I can see the argument to it. It's like, okay,
because if you took the Master Alfred in Braga, right, that's 120 points for. What is that? 39 models, and then the models themselves are only 6 points? Five points for the front line, 6 points for the back rank, and then bows for 6 points.
You can probably afford to throw in
you have a lot of. You can still get easily 40+, if not 50+ troops if you were to, if you were to do this. You throw in another captain, you get to 50 troops, and then you use all those other remaining points to go towards Gandalf, Bilbo, Biffer, Bomber.
Or you can bring Thorin and actually smash people in their faces.
My thought process with this is, sometimes you'll fill up all of your warbands in Laketown and then you'll have like 40 points left. And I mean, why would you ever take a captain of Laketown over either Biffer or Bomber? So I'd say then probably it's a no-brainer that you should take them. But just sharing from personal experience, I can't really remember a time where I have run out of might points with my Army of Laketown list. It almost never happens with me. And that's just because Braga has so many free might points anyways that it feels like taking Biffer is redundant because he just does the exact same thing as Braga. I think I've experimented with Bomber a couple times. And I'm just going to say this right now, that 4-up Restore a Will on Alfred, it's not consistent at all. I've had times when 3 or 4 turns have passed and 0 will points have been generated. And now I've got this 45-point model that isn't doing anything because it's not like he can call heroic moves because he's got his lumbering special rule. So I'm not sure about Bomber in this list because the whole point of Alfred is you're paying 20 points and you've got 3 might points. Now you're paying 65 points and you've got 3 might points and a couple more might points sometimes. So I wouldn't say just like throw these guys into every Army of Laketown list. If you've got spare points, maybe throw one of them in if you want to. They're interesting flavor. They're pretty cool, but I wouldn't take them in it all the time.
My experience has been the same as Evan's. You have done it, and it rarely feels like I'm actually getting the results I want, because I feel like for a 45-point investment, the amount of times I actually get the free will, I think in some of my best games, it might be like twice. So like that would be, I mean, it doesn't happen very often.
I share the skepticism about this. I mean, I would point out that if this strategy is going to work and pay off in any army, it's probably this one. And that's because this is an army where once you get the will into Alfred and once Alfred gives a might to somebody else, that might has much bigger effects than it does anywhere else, either because you're using the Master's Rule to fuel a 12-inch banner and a 12-inch fight value buff, or you're using Braga and you're effectively getting a point and a half of might out of the process.
Okay. Evan, I know that you said you had some lists for this army, so I'm interested to hear what you got.
So I'll go over the Green Alliance I made first, and then we can sort of talk about in general what we do for convenient allies, and then I'll go over a list I made for that as well. Obviously time dependent. So I made a 700-point army, and it's got obviously the 2 green allies, Army of Laketown and Thorin's company. So in Warband 1, there's the Master of Laketown with 7 Laketowners with swords, 3 Laketowners with spears, and 5 Laketowners with bows and spears. Warband 2 is Braga with 3 Laketowners with spears, 4 Laketowners with bows and spears, and 5 Laketowners with swords. Warband 3 is Alfred with 3 with spears, 4 with bows and spears, and 5 with swords. And then for my allied contingent of Thorin's company, I have Gandalf the Grey on horse, Bilbo Baggins, and going counter to my own advice, I have him on a pony and with Sting. And there is a reason behind this. And then I have Dwalin, and then he is on a pony. So a bit of my thought process behind this list. The reason I have Sting with Bilbo, of course, is because I ran out of warband slots. There is no other reason behind that. And that's also part of the reason why Dwalin is on pony. And going over this list, 45 models, which isn't a full-on horde, but for 700 points, the average is usually like 35, so it's it's big. It is a big army list. And it's got the 3 auto includes we talked about with the Master, Braga, and Alfred. You want to take all 3 of these models in every single Army of Laketown lists, because otherwise there's no reason to be taking an Army of Laketown list. It's got Gandalf for the blinding light. It's got Bilbo for the ring. And because I am following my own advice about not taking Bard, and especially if you take Bard in this type of list to 700 points, the army list gets super duper small. So I decided to take a less expensive grenade, that being Dwalin. And while he doesn't get the cavalry bonuses, he makes up for that with strength 5 and +1 to wounds. So he chews through basically everything, and he's the go-to model you use to take advantage of Bilbo's ring roll to assassinate heroes, because he'll just kill almost all of them. And he's on pony as well, just to keep up with the rest of the Lake Towners and give him some extra movement. And because he auto passes courage tests anyways, you can just keep him on pony and be able to keep him at move 8. And overall, I mean, I just tried to fill up as many of the Lake Towners' weaknesses as I can with the assassination and Gandalf. And that's about it.
All right. So I do like the use of the other 3 heroes, Gandalf, Bilbo, and Dwalin, better than having Bard. You're getting a lot more versatility out of those 3. I mean, obviously they're not the same points as just Bard. I agree. The 45 models, you said 45, right?
Yes.
And I think the 45 models is probably the minimum you want to go at 700 with a Defense 4 army. I think I personally might feel a little hesitant at only those numbers, but fortunately you do have like certain mitigating factors like Gandalf shutting down enemy heroes and Dwalin. I do like, I mean, you're saving as many points as possible by not arming basically your whole front rank with spears and giving the bowmen spears so that way they can stick in the back rank. So effectively your whole army is 6 points apiece when kind of averaged out, I suppose. You have more, it sounded like you had more spears than swords in general, so it allows you to be kind of flexible.
By a little bit. So I did a configuration which is a little bit different than the standard 33 swords, 33 spears, 33 bows. And basically what I did is I put all of my least valuable models in front. So I have roughly 50% sword guys, and then all of my bowmen have spears. Yeah. And then I have a very small amount of just regular spearmen. So it's basically a shield wall, in a sense, where you put your defense 4 5-point guys in front and your slightly more valuable spear and bowmen and spearmen behind. And it allows your bowmen to sort of contribute to combat without just shooting.
I think one of the best parts about the list also is Gandalf is your leader, so you don't have to worry about Master being your leader. It's so weird that he's Valor. But.
One thing to note here, I'm since Evan's talking, I'm going to play Evan's role and say, well, actually, for the special rule for ponies, which is buried within the cavalry rules, it does say that you must take a courage test even if you would ordinarily pass it.
Okay, so you take a courage test with courage 6.
It is courage 6. I mean, but with that said, I mean, you still end up on a bigger base on a pony, and you lose the ability to get spear supported by somebody who's probably going to be auto bannered. So you may want to think about drop. I mean, you can keep him on the pony to get him where he wants to be. Yeah. But then you may want to dismount him, and then he can get spear supported. Because I don't know about your Dwalin, but my Dwalin always rolls a 1-2-2 on the dual roll.
And then the banner is a 6.
Yeah, and the banner. Well, the banner is or the spearman is a 6. Yeah, and he's only got, the problem with Balin is he's only got 2 might, so you oftentimes you don't have enough might both to call heroic strikes and get him to win the dual roll. So having a bannered spear behind Dwalin is a useful thing to do.
Yeah, and that's the great thing about ponies is that they're 5 points. So if you just feel like dismounting the model, you're losing 5 points. It really doesn't matter. And if you've used the extra movement to your advantage, you've already paid that 5 points back. So the pony is just on there for flexibility's sake.
And I'd take Killy and Philly instead. Get these.
I mean, you could. The other option, actually, and this is an option that I actually considered instead of Philly and Killy, is Thorin Oaken Shield. And you drop Sting from Bilbo, you take the Oaken Shield, and then...
I think you made the better choice in my personal opinion.
Because with Thorin, you can make him your leader, and he's a bit sturdier. But
I think with Thorin, you have to make him your leader, don't you?
No,
because Gandalf and Thorin are hero legend, both of them.
Gandalf can lead the company.
This is actually, I think, the only list with 2 heroes of legend. But either way, Thorin does not provide anywhere near the hitting power that Dwalin does, so I would recommend Dwalin instead.
And that's really what I'm looking at. Strength 5 with +1 wound versus Strength 4 with that's it. Like, I mean, it's a clear choice. I mean, you get the extra point of might, but I don't think Dwalin needs it too often. So,
I think the clear choice is Ori.
As long as he's got the guy with the spear and the banner behind him. If he doesn't have the guy with the spear and banner behind him, never going to win a fight.
Spear and banner plus Gandalf shutting down whatever he's if some hero's getting too picky with him, like I think Dwalin's the better pick. So what's your convenient allies list? Unless anyone else has thoughts on this list.
I just say justice for Ori, but that's just me.
There you go.
Yes. If there is one model you would never ally into an Army of Laketown list, it would be Ori, because he accomplishes absolutely nothing.
Unless he rolls a 6 to hit with his sling.
Exactly. See, you take out that horse. See, he has use.
Yep.
Yeah. I mean, again, a lot of these models in the Thorns Company list, you could take them. I'm not entirely sure why you would want to.
I'd say allies, take them. Survivors of Laketown, and just make a fool impossible.
Yeah.
So, on Ori, if you look at his Deadeye rule, it says when he scores a 6 when rolling a 2 hit, which is different from rolls a 6.
Yes.
So you could
be able to.
If
you used to be able to take Alfred and then pump his might points up, and then roll a bunch of auto wounds.
You still can in this list, right? Because you can take Alfred. You could put Ori in here. You could.
Well, you can't buff. Ori with Alfred.
You can't give him might.
It's not a Laketown.
That's the problem. All right, never mind.
I'm just hearing the next Megalith is coming to town. That's what I'm hearing.
Yeah, with his 1 attack, fight 3, and strength 3, he can really do a lot of damage in combat.
I don't even know why we're talking about Ori.
Anyway,
I want to see him in a list, and I want to see the moment where he takes out that valuable model with a slingshot, and then I will just go and run around the place. I don't know. I want to see it.
It's a bit like Morgul Stalkers thing.
Yeah, see, Morgul Stalkers, Morgul Knights. See, we're getting to where I'm
just gonna murder a ring wraith on Felbeast.
Well, that's what he's for. He's for taking down that Felbeast.
I have specifically, I think this was a long time ago, but I've specifically looked at him to just say, okay, I don't want to buy Legolas, so I'm gonna take this discount Legolas and use his might point, because he does have 2 shots if he stands still. So 2 shots. And he has 1 might point, so all you need is 1/5 with 2 dice, and you might it up, and then there you go. You've got your Deadeye special.
In my opinion, he's not discounted enough to be a discount Legolas.
That's right. Legolas is a discount version of him.
You'd never take him, but in theory, in like a couple of games, he might be useful.
Okay, like 30 points.
He just needs the Laketown special rule so he can have 4 might behind that slingshot.
They make a rule specifically. If you take Ori, you can give him might. All right. We'll move on to the other list for Evan, if you want to go over that.
So just a bit of advice for taking Army of Laketown and convenient allies and why you would want to take them. The reason you take these guys is numbers, obviously. And part of that, and the reason you take these guys over Survivors of Laketown is you get a Hero of Valor, which is the Master of Laketown, for 50 points instead of Gandalf and Bard, which are 200, 180 points apiece. And if you take Convenient Allies, you're probably, unless you're going for a Horde, you're going for 3 warbands. The Master of Laketown, Braga, and Alfred. As we said before, they're the auto-includes. They make the list useful, and then you're either spamming out guys and going for like just 40 Laketowners and then throwing on a bunch of allies and stuff like that, or you're maybe using them to spear support some other models. And there's actually many different ways you can conveniently ally this list. You can try and go for the full-on spam, maybe ally in take, say, Master, Braga, Alfred, fill up their warbands, and then ally in Legolas, and then take 15 elves to deal with the courage problem and to get some additional shooting, and then maybe throw in Galadriel, Lady of Light, and there you go. You've got like 60 models and blinding light and a whole bunch of shooting. The only problem with that alliance idea is that you have a lack of hitting power. There's another way to run this list, which is you take Braga, Alfred, and the Master and like 30-ish guys, and then you just throw in a whole bunch of heroes. So an idea with that would be at 800 points, throw in Dwalin, throw in Thorin, and then maybe like Legolas or Thranduil or something like that. And Galadriel, Lady of Light, which, by the way, if you're conveniently allying this list, you're always taking Galadriel, Lady of Light.
Why?
Many different reasons.
No, I agree with you, but like,
yeah.
I mean, some of our newer viewers may not understand why.
So first off, you get a Fight 6/3 attack hero, which is great, just to add some additional ability to hit things in this list. And second off, you get Blinding Light for free without spending any might points, which is absolutely incredible. And she protects all of your super squishy defense 4 guys. And also, she has a bunch of very interesting interactions with heroes. Like that whole point about Sap Willing the Master, that's no longer a problem because you just cast Fortify Spirit on him. And he doesn't care at all about the opponent's spells. She can also protect Braga in the same way, and she just allows your warriors and heroes to just get the most out of them. And best of all, she's cheap. She's 130 points, which compared to Gandalf is 50 points less. So you get a whole bunch more for that investment.
You can bring Ori alongside. You can bring Ori and still save points.
Oh yeah, Ori, yeah. Of course. So I guess I'll just go over the list I made, which is sort of a combination of those two ideas. So this is an 800-point convenient allied list. It includes the Misty Mountains, Army of Laketown, the Halls of Thranduil, and the White Council. So I feel like a couple people who know how you ally with those lists already know what models are in the list. So first off, I have Gwahir as my army leader. And then Master of Laketown, Braga, and Alfred. And Alfred doesn't have any models in his warband. And the Master has 3 bowmen, 6 spearmen, and then 1 bowman with spear. Then Braga has 7 spearmen, 2 bowmen, and then 1 bowman with spear. And then in the Halls of Thranduil warband, Legolas Greenleaf on horse with 2 Mirkwood cavalry, a Wood Elf sentinel, 4 Mirkwood elves with bows, and 7 Mirkwood elves with shields. And then in the final warband is Galadriel, Lady of Light. So I sort of tried to combine all of these ideas into an army list that I think covers basically every single thing that you want to in an army list.
Except for model count.
Yeah, it's got. I mean, it's got 40 models.
Is it 40?
It's not. Yeah, it's got 40 models,
I don't know, maybe I'm like counting, and I'm like hearing like 27. Yeah,
and it's got 7 elves with shield and 4 elves with bows, and then a wood elf sentinel, 2 cavalry models,
yeah, sure. Okay.
1 flying bird. So it doesn't have any problems with maneuverability, especially with Braga in it. The master, he can still support models. He can use his still gets his banner effect, and because you're not spamming out on elves, you can still benefit your normal Laketown guard as well. And basically, the thought process behind this list was to eliminate every single weakness that the Army of Laketown has, but mitigate their strengths in order to create a stronger and more well-rounded list.
Do you have anything that gives courage?
I have elves.
He's going to charge the elves in the front.
Charge the elves in front. Okay.
Yeah, the elves go in front. And so, yeah, you get the maneuverability with the Mirkwood Cavalry, and you get a monster in the list, which, by the way, this is a topic for another time, but Gwahir is absolutely ridiculous. I think I recently played a game against my father. It was like to the death, and he had Lothlorien, and I didn't have a banner, and he did, and then he castled like behind a barrier, and I won the game exclusively because I killed like 10 models with hurls from Gwahir.
Damn bird.
And I think if correct me if I'm wrong, like half the lists we've done in the duel have had Gwahir in it.
Yeah,
I swear every list had like if we had a duel, one list had Gwahir minimum.
And the great part about this list is Gwahir normally just completely drops to magic, but you have Fortify Spirit or channeled Fortify Spirit if you need it. So there's no way you're magicking Gwahir to death. So, and overall, I'd say Gwahir just does so much more than Bard ever would if you're taking him in this list. And I mean, you have Legolas. You're not having problems with shooting.
Fair enough.
And yeah.
No, I mean, I think it's true. I mean, obviously, Bard is his true values, as you mentioned, his buffs he bring, which of course don't have any effect here. I'm curious, why are all these alliances also convenient with survivors? And if so, why not just take them?
Because
I guess you'd have to bring Bard, and you'd have
one, you lose the banner effect.
Yeah.
2, you lose the ridiculous amount of might points from Braga. So I guess you could swap out Gwahir and then take Bard from the survivors list. There are a couple of problems with this. One of which is you don't get Braga, so your might points aren't as absolutely as ridiculous as they were. Which, by the way, this list has 14 points of might plus Alfred, so it's got a lot of might points. Bard is an interesting idea, but overall, I don't find him to be as beneficial as Gwahir, because he doesn't add in that hitting power that Gwahir does. Because otherwise, you'd go up against a defense 7 army, and all of your guys would bounce off. And Gwahir means you can hurl through lines, you can sit there and rend as well, and just crunch through a bunch of models. And of course, you don't get the fight 4 on your other Laketowners if you're taking survivors.
Okay.
All right.
Any other last thoughts?
I just like challenging Evan and asking why.
So if there's anything that people pick up from this, apparently Gwahir seems to be in every list ever. So if you're ever making a list, make sure Gwahir is in your list.
It would actually be interesting to go back and kind of do like an analysis of which, because we did that one episode a long time ago on like which are the most underused models and which are the best models, that type of thing. Actually go back and see which figures show up in all of our lists repeatedly, and
I promise you, Guahir's number one. I know that for a fact. Guahir is number one. I don't think I've ever seen somebody use more. At least, like if I always say this to myself. At least, like if I remember it, then it sticks out. So I don't remember anybody else, but I definitely remember Guahir being used.
I mean, honestly, I think if Gullivar was like a convenient ally to have more armies, you'd probably see Gullivar more on the evil side.
Well, I mean that counts, right? I mean, which figures are convenient allies, so you can put them into.
I bet you number 2 would be Suladan, because I think we've used Suladan.
I think you may be right. If Suladan is not number 1.
Well, a lot of times, like you'll see Rainier make a list where it'll be like Suladan and like he'll do like the Corsairs, or he'll do something like that.
We also pick armies we're comfortable with, and so which is why sometimes we'll mix it up and play an army of ruffians or something. But
I guess the thing with Guahir is that what other monster are you taking in a good army list? Treebeard? Too expensive, and he doesn't move fast enough.
Almost. If it wasn't for the new FAQ, people were really strongly considering Quick Beam.
I mean, he doesn't have Heroic Strike.
Well, I'm just saying people were considering. I mean, he's a natural fight 7 or 6.
Yeah, I think he's fight 6.
Does he have defense? Does he have Heroic Defense?
No, he's March, which is ironic for an Ent army. I'm not really sure.
Hey, it's all in the name. Quick.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah. And I mean, Beorn is just a worse Treebeard in almost every single way, so no one's ever going to take him. So your only option is Guahir, and I mean, he's incredibly good for his points. He's a pretty cheap monster. He's cheaper than a Ringwraith on Fellbeast. He's got Fight 8, which is ridiculous. He's got Fly, which is already makes him just better than
a bird.
90% monsters and 90% of the monsters in general, because the big problem with monsters is their maneuverability. And I mean, he has monstrous charge, which
I think the interesting thing about Guahir as well is he is a convenient ally or green ally with every single army in the game. So you can include him in every single army and don't have to worry about it being red. I mean, that is another really impressive fact about it, that you can just take him with any army, and you lose your bonus, but if your bonus wasn't that good in the first place, or you don't mind losing it, add in an eagle that has 3 might and can do what Guahir does.
Guahir, the perfect side dish to any army.
It's also the case for Legolas, because Thranduil's halls are green or yellow with everybody.
Yeah.
And so everybody seems to be using Legolas a lot.
Yes, and if you have noticed, another very common ally into every single list is Galadriel, Lady of Light. And while White Council doesn't have the scope that the other 2 lists have with the amount of green and yellow allies, they still have a ton of them. And it's almost like the reason Galadriel, Lady of Light doesn't have one area where she's ridiculously overpowered, but she's one of those things where you can optimize your army around her, and then you say, okay, I don't want to deal with shooting. I don't want to deal with magic. I want to be good against hordes because of her Instill Fear, and I want to just have a nice, decent hitting hero with 3 might points, and then you just throw her into the army list, and she covers absolutely all of those bases, and then the rest of your army can be literally whatever, and it'll probably be a fairly decent army list.
Well, meanwhile, Círdan sits and stews and silently plots revenge against Jay Clare.
My only issue with the Lady of Light is that, there's like no weakness to her. Is my problem. It's like,
no, she has weaknesses. I mean,
I mean, think about it. She has. She can't.
She's
defense. She's defense 4.
4. Yeah, like she has clear obvious.
Well, actually, maybe she is defense 3.
No, I think
she's defense 3.
She's defense
but,
3, yes.
Yeah.
Well, I'm not arguing that.
Strength 4. She's strength 4, but
I'm not arguing the fact that she defense wise she's weak.
I think she's got clear weaknesses. I'm like,
so we look at it like this: she's fight 6, and she isn't unarmed in this profile, so she can fight normally. She then also has 3 attacks at strength 4, so she can fight pretty much anything. I mean, obviously you're not throwing her into Aragorn, but if Aragorn comes up against her, she has heroic strike, so she can still match him. You know, she has 3 fate that can be re-rolled. She can.
We're still doing the Army of Laketown review, right? That's what.
Well, we're going into a.
To be fair, we are talking about convenient alliances, and all of the ones we've talked about, Gwahir, Legolas, and Galadriel, and a bunch of elves, were all allied into my list. And we are going through the reasoning of why they are so common.
Well, to put a cap on this, I mean, I think the takeaway from this whole discussion is that the Army of Laketown is probably one of the best armies to ally into something else, because it's a bunch of cheap bodies that can ally with a bunch of other things.
Yeah.
And if you're looking for an army that gives the most bang for your buck and the most bulk for your buck, Army of Laketown is a really good choice.
Yeah. I mean, if it wasn't for the fact that Army of Laketown can't ally into any Lord of the Rings era armies without becoming red allies, I would say this is the perfect alliance army. But because you can't take in your ridiculously broken Lord of the Rings stuff like Boromir of Gondor and Minas Tirith or something like that, then it's not just flawless in its perfection in alliances. But if you're going for like White Council, Gwahir, Thranduil's Halls, even in you can do a sort of Battle of the Five Armies type list, and it'll still function decently well. And I mean, it's okay with green alliances and pure, especially at lower points. But throwing convenient allies into this list just does so much.
Okay. I think we'll wrap it up there. Let us know in the comments if you agree with our opinions on Laketown, and if you would go more a traditional keeping it green, or if you would go convenient allies all over the place. Let us know in the comments as well if there's anything you'd like us to discuss in future episodes, and any lists that you'd like us to go over as well. And we look forward to seeing you next week.
Bye, guys.
Bye.